Welcome to Season 6 of the Charity Matters podcast. I'm Heidi Johnson, nonprofit founder, lifelong helper, and your host. I've been interviewing these modern-day heroes for over a decade with my blog, and I'm so excited to finally be sharing these inspiring conversations with our podcast. Join me as we learn the challenges and stories of innovators, entrepreneurs, and modern-day heroes who set out to solve the problems of humanity. Have you ever thought about how our teachers learn to teach? There's so much conversation these days about what's happening in our schools and what our children are learning. But are we really thinking about how our teachers are learning and how they're learning to excite our students? Today's guest is an expert on this topic. Katie Trowbridge is the founder of Curiosity to Create, a really exciting organization that is working to empower our teachers. And I'm so excited to share her amazing journey and our conversation about how she's making an incredible difference in our world. We are so excited to have Katie Trowbridge here today from Curiosity to Create. Thank you, Katie, for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
We're so excited to have you here. And I love educators and I love teachers and I love learning. So I'm really excited about this conversation to learn more about Curiosity to Create, which just the name in itself kind of makes me smile. So why don't we just dive right in, and why don't you tell everyone a little bit about what Curiosity to Create does?
All right. So Curiosity to Create is only about 2 years old. So we're still babies in this area. We have been working in education for a while, after school programs, YMCA. But about a year ago, I was a board member and said, what would be really great is if instead of just having these after school programs, we really reach out to teachers. Because if you can impact one teacher, you're impacting thousands of students. And then they looked at me and said, great, you want to run that? And I kind of said, well, I'm a teacher full-time. And so I started part-time, and then now this is my full-time working in a nonprofit. And it's amazing what we do. And as we work with the teachers and the educators, the administrators, to help build in and infuse creative thinking, critical thinking into existing curriculum. So, a lot of teachers today have very scripted lessons that they have to teach, right?
Right.
Or they have an outline that they need to teach. And they think that, well, I can't put any thinking into that or creativity into that. And yet there's so many possibilities and ways that we can use what you're already doing in your classroom to promote that way of thinking. And if you looked at any of the research, right now they're saying, like LinkedIn and World Forum, they're all saying that out of the 10 top skills that people need to be successful in the future, 1 is critical thinking and 2 is creative thinking. And we're not doing it in the schools. Right. Our teachers don't really know how. They know they need to, but I keep hearing, I don't know how, right? Or I don't have time. And so we really are passionate about helping teachers make sure that when their kids leave their classroom, they're thinking about things.
Well, and teachers are givers and nonprofit founders are givers and helpers. So it makes sense because they kind of go together. They kind of go hand in hand. But did you have like a lot of background did you grow up with a really philanthropic family, or were you always helping in your community or involved in things? Yep. Like what was kind of your early childhood and all of that? I'm always fascinated with the seeds of how someone gets someplace.
So I was a pastor's kid.
There we go.
So that immediately, like you said, there you go. Immediately a pastor's kid. I was an only child. So I wanted a youth group in the school, in the church that we were currently ministering in. I would have to create it. A lot of times my dad would go into these churches that were dying, and he would raise it up and make it work, and then he'd leave. And so a lot of times, as a kid, I was like, well, I want a youth group. There is none. So I'll just start my own. So I did that quite a bit. And then I've always worked with teenagers and had a passion for teenagers and for children. And I was in marketing for a while and went in to get my teaching degree. And there was a nonprofit or a couple of schools who kind of wanted to start looking more at characteristics,
Right.
character traits, all the SEL before SEL was SEL,
Right.
before all that. And so I started a nonprofit called Kids Matter, and that is still going.
Did you start Kids Matter?
I did. I
Oh,
started Kids
wow.
Matter with another woman named Denise Vaughn. And so I ran that for about a year, but there was no way I could teach full time and run this. So I handed it over to a woman named Ida Lynn Winhold, and she just ran with it for about 20 years, and she's doing really well. So that's kind of where it's always been a part of me. It's always been, I mean, even when I was in high school, I started the Key Club, and I always want to be helping and doing things and making sure people, in my mind, when I was young, making sure people were happy and getting along.
Right. Well, that makes
really thinking what I was really doing.
So I'm kind of fascinated because you a lot of people say there's like a moment when they decide to start something, and you shared a little bit about being involved with your group of teachers and a board, but I'm a little fascinated because the nonprofit model, as we know, is difficult when you rely on the kindness of others as a business model. It's not always the easiest way. Why did you choose? You could have done this as a for-profit model.
Right.
So why did you choose, and how did the whole process come when it was like, oh, this needs to be a nonprofit? Like how did that come together? Because it's just not an easy route.
No. And making the decision to leave a job like teaching that has a pension that is very steady. I've been at this school for 23 years.
In a shaky economy that's not super solid right now.
Right. It was a big decision for me to make this move. And I thought about it a lot, obviously, but I love teaching. It's in my heart. It's makes me happy. And all of a sudden I realized over the last couple of years, not only was I not happy, but my coworkers weren't happy. My students weren't happy. There was the lack of engagement, the lack of thinking for themselves. This idea of just get me the A. What's going to give me the A? What's the right answer? I don't want to know what the right answer is. And I saw that there was this excitement that used to be in schools of curiosity, and was just disappearing. But then I also know that we have all these professional developments. And if there's educators out there, they know you sit in a professional development and somebody just talks at you. Right. And they can be very expensive. And sometimes you can't get the kind of coaching that you need on a teacher's salary. It can cost hundreds of dollars an hour, and teacher salaries don't have that. Coaching. A lot of schools don't have the money that they could to put into this kind of development. So I really went to what's called the Driscoll Foundation. And I talked with them quite a bit, and they were very gracious in giving me a grant to make sure that this is able to be offered to everyone. So no matter what size district, no matter where you are. I remember I was at a conference speaking, and a woman came up to me and said, so I'm in the middle of Nevada. And I teach, 4 different subjects. We have a really tiny school. Could you help us? And I said, absolutely. And she, well, we don't have a lot of money. That's okay. I have the scholarship fund that we have. We try and raise money as much as we can, but it's not easy. It's in this society. It's the money. It's
harder than ever right now, right? Because as things are difficult, it's definitely harder than ever. Right now, it's absolutely challenging with the economy. And I understand. I run a youth leadership organization, and so we work with 5 different archdioceses and with thousands of kids each year. But we train our college kids, train our high school kids, and our high school kids teach our middle school kids, and we do a lot of creative things in the way that we teach because it's peer to peer. But I see the struggle in fundraising and making this happen when people right now are just trying to pay their own bills, and they don't have a lot of extra to support causes they care about. It's just there's a trickle down effect, and it's
Well, and that's something a lot of nonprofits are changing. So we have now opened a shop. So you can buy stickers and buttons and t-shirts, and knowing that all the money that you go on, you buy a poster, or, we just filled out an order of 200 stickers that a teacher bought. It all goes back to the scholarship to help other teachers. So I think a lot of nonprofits are now getting creative.
That I agree. And they have to.
Right.
And
it's not just this gala where everybody dresses up, right? It's we have to change the way we're raising funds.
And I have someone who can help you run your shop. I just talked to them yesterday. Shine On Club that's doing all this great work with kids, empowering them to, they distribute all your t-shirts, they make all of your stuff, they send it all out for you, they do everything. They take like 6% and they make it all happen for your anything that you want. So I just talked to them yesterday. So I need to connect you with those guys.
Absolutely.
But I do think we have to get creative. It's tricky right now. It's hard. So speaking of things being hard, what are some of your biggest challenges? I mean, usually I didn't try to, I'm not trying to spoil or put words in your mouth, but fundraising is usually the top of the list.
I would say that. I would absolutely say fundraising. I would also say that raising awareness, since we're a new nonprofit, for example, on Giving Tuesday, right? We thought, we're just going to flood the, social media on Giving Tuesday. We're going to get all this money. We had set this huge goal, and it didn't work because we're new and we're little, and people are giving to huge organizations, not a small one, like us. So I think raising awareness is a big one, because that's where the funds will come then, right? Once people understand what we do and believe in what we do,
absolutely,
they're more willing to invest in what we do.
Absolutely. And people always want to invest in education. I think education is I forget if it's health and education or religion or religion, health, education, but those are the top three, kind of in, the hierarchy of needs. And I think that's great. I think that's fantastic. So, I mean, I always, am fascinated because this work is not easy. It's hard. I mean, not only are we fundraising and we're doing everything, but we also have our own lives. I mean, you and I are talking about, before we jumped on, about moving and unpacking. You have laundry, you still have your bills, you're in your life. And then you're carrying the weight of being an entrepreneur, being a new entrepreneur. And there isn't enough time in the day for everything, all the people we need to serve. And I think it's one of the hardest things about being a helper is when you realize you can't help everybody and you can't do it all. And that just, it's just one of those things we have to kind of deal with. Doctors deal with, they can't
all the time. Doctors can't do it all the time. Can't save everybody.
Yeah. You can't save everybody. Right. And we do, and it's a blessing and a curse, right? So what fuels you to keep going when it's overwhelming, when it's hard?
Well, and it's interesting that you said that because, I started my career in business, and then it went from business and marketing to education. And I thought, educators, they get summers off, everybody thinks that, please, working 8 to 3. And I thought, this is hard. Wow. Being a teacher is so hard. So then I thought, okay, well, I'll, run a nonprofit. How hard can it be? And it's such a different kind of stress.
Right.
So I had, 100 kids, 150 kids as a high school teacher. And I worried about those 150 kids. And I worried about making sure that they were being successful in what they do. But now I have a staff that I have to make sure we raise money enough for salaries to keep them going. Yep. I worry about all the teachers that I'm working with, so it's completely changed. I think when I was a young teacher, teaching occupied my mind so much. But then I learned you can do a rhythm, you kind of learn. Now this is, my mom called me the other day and said, "Are you busy?" And I went, "Yes, I'm running a huge nonprofit. Like, yes, I'm busy." So, it's a different kind of stress, but a different level of commitment as well.
Right.
You're so passionate about what you're doing. And you want this to get out to everybody, that it's just a continual mindset. And I think being a creator, being a huge believer in creative and critical thinking, when you talk about balance, my grandkids are a huge plus, right? It's finding the time to play.
Right. Right.
And
Absolutely.
turn this off, turn the computer off, even if it's to go and do something constructive, like as you mentioned, I just recently moved. So in between my breaks yesterday, I built a table, from there. That's like, but just to get
I hope it wasn't one of those IKEA ones with extra parts.
no, but to get your mind off of it. Otherwise, I
Right.
would sit here, I think, as and you'd think, oh man, what do I need to do next? I've got to make sure that my staff is okay. I got to make sure that I'm helping change education. That's a huge goal.
Right. And I think that is what the burden that we carry is that we don't go to bed at night thinking, I didn't pump out enough, whatever at the factory today. We think about the people who rely on us, who are literally feel like they're on our back. And for you, it's teachers, and the ripple down of if those teachers don't have what they need, then the kids don't have what they need. And somehow we feel personally responsible for that. But it's hard. It's hard to shut it off. And it's hard to kind of make me time, which you have to do, but it's very hard to do. I mean, the older we get, the better we get at it, but it still doesn't mean it's easy to set aside people who need you.
Right.
And there's just not enough hours in the day.
There aren't. Right. And I think, and you say the older you get, your body also tells you, you have to stop.
You have to stop. Yeah. You have to stop.
Absolutely. Your body just gives you all this, you need to stop.
You're done.
You're done.
You're out. Yeah, no more gas, not enough Diet Coke or Celsius to fuel this body.
Right. Your body just shuts down, and
you're done.
Your other big, your big sign.
Yeah, you're done. So tell me, I know you guys are babies or toddlers at 2 years old, but what, and to me, success and impact, I mean, I think one of the frustrating things sometimes is trying to measure what we do. Is obviously foundations and grants and people like that and donors want to know how many people have you served, how, all these metrics, all these numbers. I run a leadership organization. How do you measure leadership? I listened to a Catholic nun one day yelling at a foundation saying, how do you measure love? Because we're asked to measure these crazy things, like love, leadership, knowledge. And yes, you have test scores and things like that, but how would you measure your impact? And maybe it could be a story, it could be numbers. This is not a foundation, true, false, question, but I think impact's one of those tricky words.
It really is. And it really is when you're looking at thinking strategies, right? Creative and critical thinking. Although we know that it's necessary and we need it, how do you measure it? And I get that question from teachers continually. How do you measure if a student is being creative? How do I know that by putting this into my curriculum, I'm actually going to be serving my student and helping them be better? And a lot of times that doesn't happen until 10 years from now, right? So that's part of the issue as well. So if it's not going to happen 10 years from now,
right?
How do we measure that? How do we follow that kid from first grade all the way up to college and see if, risk taking and accepting failure and all those things that help with creative and critical thinking actually worked. And it's hard for grants. I mean, my grant writer has struggled because they want data. Everybody wants data.
Right. And it's
hard to measure.
Right. It's hard. It's really hard to measure. And it doesn't mean we're not doing great work, and it doesn't mean that we're not moving the needle forward, but to try to say, okay, we've all come together and we've done this, and people just need the stats, and it isn't always what stats aren't everything. There are stories. There are, right. There's engagement. There's, I've got a little letter in the mail yesterday from a 6th grader who went to our program who said, thank you for getting me out of my shell and making me confident. I know this is going to make my life better someday. In the long run, I already feel like a happier person, and wrote me this really sweet letter. Thank you, Michelle Villa, for this sweet little note, my 6th grader. And you're like, okay, like I know from that story that we moved something there. Am I going to know until she's 16? Is she going to use the leadership skills she was taught? Maybe, maybe not. But chances are good she's going in the right direction. Right. And I think you're in a similar situation.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. And so then how do you really measure that? How do you really... and the stories, I think the storytelling is a big factor in nonprofits right now. That again is one of those things that we're changing, right? Is the narrative. and showing the lives of people that we have impacted, giving the testimonials, saying, look at this teacher said that this has absolutely changed the way she envisions teaching in her classroom. Or, another teacher who said, my classroom is so much more fun. And so I enjoy teaching much more. Well, how do you measure that? Right.
Right.
That's awesome. So maybe that teacher was going to quit, which we know a lot of teachers are right now, returning, quitting. And now they found joy through teaching creatively and critically. But putting that out in a graph for a donor to see is nearly impossible. And so I think that's part of when you talked about some of the challenges, that's part of the challenges. How do we have the data to prove that this is working when it's very much soft data and it's very much storytelling?
Yeah, you and I are in the exact same boat on this. And it is just, it's an endless looping circle that you're like, I think I'm going to get to that data mountain. I think I'm going to get, I'm going to climb this one. I'm going to come back with a stat that's going to just make donors say, oh my gosh.
Right.
And it's more believing in the core value of the education and what you're doing, or believing in the value of leadership and investing and things like that. Because I think
it's interesting too, that when we go to conferences and I speak and I talk with teachers, they all love the fact that we're a nonprofit. Right. It's the first thing that when I always say we're a nonprofit, because a lot of professional developments are for profit.
Right.
And so they love that we provide the scholarship for teachers. I think it draws them to us even more. So knowing that we're here to support each other.
Right.
But that's great. But, right.
There's still payroll. There's still payroll. Right.
There's the payroll I've got to get through. So, I think that's, people are very respectful of nonprofit organizations, but as you said earlier, the economy is hitting us pretty hard.
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, I know we're feeling it. I think a lot of people I've talked to are feeling it, and I think we just we buckle up and we tighten our belts and we figure a way out, because nonprofit and entrepreneurs and founders are creative thinkers, because they have to get creative. Right. They have to find new ways, to your whole point, to solve the toughest problems of society. Right. And that's what we've taken on our shoulders. So if you could dream any dream for Curiosity to Create, and you can't be a founder without a dream and a vision or a leader, which you obviously have one, because you've gotten this far, what does that look like?
It's interesting because I have, kind of a list of what ifs, right? What if Curiosity to Create really takes off? What if? And I think my biggest dream is that students and teachers and schools start seeing the importance of these soft skills and see them more as essential skills. That it will just be a natural thing to, of course, include questioning, of course, include open-mindedness, of course, include curiosity and into your curriculum. Like, this is just an obvious, right? So it's not just the Common Core standards, which a lot of people use, but it's this, how do we get kids to start thinking? And I think a huge win for me and my staff is when we hear from teachers, my kids are actually asking better questions. My kids are actually thinking. My kids are excited about what they're learning because it's something that they choose to learn. They have investment in. So my dream is that it just be, well, of course we're doing this. Of course we're incorporating it, right? And across the curriculum, across the nation, internationally, people start really embracing the way to think for themselves.
Right. And the trickle down potential is just enormous. When you think about how many lives you change. I mean, education does change the world. And it literally, that is, you get a teacher excited and they get 50 students excited, or 30 students, or however many, and they get excited, and it just keeps going. I mean, it's really exciting.
You look at as a nonprofit too, a lot of times we are here to solve social issues, right? And what a better way to solve social issues, but then being a creative and critical problem solver. So if we have these issues in our society, but kids are coming out of school just saying, let me Google it or get me the right answer, then we're not going to be solving these big issues that are not on Google.
Right.
right? So like, there's this huge impact that it can have of teaching a first grader or even a 12th grader how to think for themselves and how to problem solve.
Right. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's a teacher, who's a big listener to the podcast, the other day, and she was saying, she had just heard that AI, artificial intelligence, some teachers are starting to use artificial intelligence to the point of not thinking for yourself. And she said she really thought about that, and she thought, God, I don't know. That feels like that's just not, it goes, and it instinctually, that goes against my grain. Because as a teacher, my job is to create and to find all these things. So then she was asking someone at her school about it. And they said, oh, we've blocked all the ability at school to even do artificial intelligence. And she said, oh, and I said, well, how do you feel about having that blocked? And she said, well, I don't know, because part of me thinks, is it going to give me a different way a path to think that maybe I would not have gone down? Or is it going to take away from my brain power?
Right.
Which I know is a whole other conversation, but those are some challenges you're dealing with too.
Right. And I get that question probably, I would say almost 95% of the time when I'm talking at conferences or talking in classrooms, and what do we do about AI? And I keep saying, well, do you remember when we didn't know what to do with the calculator, or we didn't know what to do with the internet? Right. So we have to embrace it, and we have to, if it's going to do some of the thinking for us, great, but it's not a human. So we have to now even more so teach our students how to think on a higher level, because I can just put in a prompt or a question into, AI and get information, but we have to be a higher level than that. It's just information from the internet, information. It's not thinking and problem solving. And so we can't, I wouldn't want it taken away, because you have to learn how to use it as a tool.
Absolutely.
But I do want to have teachers start saying, oh, this will make me even more creative.
Right. And how can I have a creative idea that I can put in there, and that I can start working to build my creative process and use it as a tool, not a competitor.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Which should be a tool.
Which makes total sense. So what life lessons have you learned on this journey? I mean, obviously you've been teaching for a long time. You've been doing this work for a long time, even though it wasn't in the nonprofit. But what lessons have you kind of learned in the last couple of years in doing this that you could share with us? Because you're a teacher and we need a lesson.
I think one of my biggest lessons that I've learned is patience. That I want to go as a visionary, as an implementer. I want to be speaking at all these districts. I want, to have my curriculum all over the place. I want, now. I want it now. Willy Wonka. So patience has been a real life lesson for me lately. I also think asking for help has been something that I've learned. And I think a lot of that, in my classroom, which was room 246, in my classroom at Naperville North at 246, that was my home. I had control over what was going to happen in a day. Right. I knew what I was teaching. I knew what my assessments were going to be. I knew what the students were going to be there. I knew some of what they're bringing into my classroom as far as baggage. I knew those things. Now I don't have control. Like sometimes my day is gone and I didn't get what I needed done, or I had a list of things prepared and none of that got done because I was putting out fires or something else came up. So
welcome to the nonprofit world.
Exactly. So I think that is a major life lesson that I've learned, that I can't control everything. And a little bit of chaos is a good thing, because that's where some of the learning really takes place. But, being patient has been a really big one for me. And then managing people. Right. That's been a real life lesson as well. I mean, managing teenagers was one thing, but managing adults.
Teenagers are much easier, aren't they?
Yeah. And a board of directors, that's a totally different way of management.
Yeah. I mean, we work with teenagers primarily. Like I said, our college kids teach our high school kids, and our high school kids teach our middle school kids, but we work with a lot of teenagers, and I love teenagers. Like that's my sweet spot. I love them. I just think they are the best. And I totally get that, because I would rather manage teenagers than a group of adults every day. And most people look at me like, "Are you crazy, Heidi?" I'm like, "Oh my God, they're so much fun. They're so
Oh, I
great.
love it. Oh yeah. I mean,
Their energy, their
oh,
ideas, they're just joyful.
absolutely.
I love it. I love
I do
them."
too. I do too. But then put me in a board meeting and I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
totally different
it's a
skills.
little stickier, a little trickier.
Yeah. And so I've really had to learn how to manage that and almost switch your hats a little bit of, okay, now
Right.
I'm in my teacher mode, now I'm in my administrator role, now I'm in my management role. I mean, I think that that's been a real life lesson for me, as well as what we talked about earlier of I've got to put some time aside for me.
Yeah. 100%. 100% put your mask on yourself before you put it on your
Mhm.
child, which
Right.
we have to just keep reminding ourselves over and over. So how do
Right.
you think you've changed in this journey?
Uh, this immensely, immensely.
Really?
I do. I think that the way that I taught in my classroom, I still use when I teach in my workshops, right? Because you still want it to be engaging and you still want it to have
Right.
fun and kids to learn and teachers to learn. So that hasn't changed. What's changed is all of a sudden this business mindset has had to come in, right? So what are
Right.
financials? What can we afford? What do we need to raise? That administration hat, even though I had my administration degree in education, it's very different. You're managing
Right.
families and this is what can we do? What can't we do?
Right.
And I think that the weight on my shoulders has, as much as I thought, oh, this is going to be easier, the weight on my shoulders, I feel like the world sometimes is just sitting here.
Yep.
Right. And
Yep.
I've had to learn how to juggle that. It's a very different kind of managing. And I think I've changed. I think I've become stronger. I think I've become more confident. I know that I have become more creative in problem solving. So even though I'm teaching that and I'm really putting it to work in my own organization, in my own life.
Because we don't have a choice. When you don't have resources, you have to be creative.
Right.
I mean, it's survival, really.
Right.
And at the end of the day, nonprofits we're just trying to survive, all of us, right? We want to thrive. We want to help as many people and serve as many people as we can.
Right.
But we need to, in order to help everybody, we have to get creative. I mean, that's just so I love that that's like a full circle to everything that you're doing, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I see it even more so in my life now. Even though I was teaching it in my classroom for years, but actually applying it to my own life and managing, juggling all of these things has really, I think, changed me.
Is that art intimidating life intimidating,
yeah.
But there is a little bit of that, right?
Right. Absolutely.
I love that.
I'm a huge believer in cooperation. And I've talked to several people about, as nonprofits, as education, in the education world, that we have to start cooperating instead of competing.
Right.
Right. So how can
amen.
we help each other? And I think that that's got to be part of the way we start focusing in nonprofits. How can I help you, Heidi? How can you help me?
Right.
You're working with youth. I'm working with teachers. So that we start supporting each other instead of this, oh, I raised this much money. How much did you raise? Or, I've impacted this much, going back to the data. I think
the fact that there's competition is ridiculous. I mean, but I see it all the time.
Yep, me too.
I see it with schools for admissions. I see the things I see sometimes in schools that I work with a lot of schools. I'm like, wow, like it's right. Why is there a competition there? Why are they not supporting each other? Because it's always better when we come together. If we always are more successful and we're all rowing together in the same direction than rowing against each other, we don't get anywhere. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. But it's sometimes one of the bad parts of human nature. But
and it is, and that's why I really, whenever I talk to people or different,
I love that
and stuff, I always say, how can we help each other? Like, what can we do to support each other? Because I raise awareness for you, you raise awareness for me. It still is making the world a better place, and that's what this is all about, right?
That is exactly what it's all about. So, with that, you've queued up my next question: how can we support you? how can we help you? Where can we follow you? Where can we donate? How do we get involved? How do we bring this to our school district?
Right. So if you go to Curiosity2, it's a number 2, create.org, you're going to find all of our information on that. You'll also find that we have a network, which I'm really excited about. We just started it, which is another way of our trying to be creative and earning some money and also supporting teachers, so that there's a place where teachers can go to get lesson plans, to communicate with each other. Like, I'm having a hard time teaching this. We have 25 creative educational experts that will answer some of those questions. Again, the whole idea of supporting each other, right?
I love that.
So we have a scholarship fund called the June Barnard Scholarship Fund. She's our founder. And we have a scholarship fund that will help teachers and schools be able to afford professional development and coaching. I think coaching is one of the most beneficial things for teachers right now, when you look at our world and how teachers don't have a lot of experience, or because of the emergency situation of a shortage in teaching, people are just without any kind of training are going in. And they can't afford it. So the one-on-one coaching from me or from some of my experts is so vital to be able to just sit and say, okay, so what did you do today? How did it go? But they can't necessarily afford that.
Right.
And so having the scholarship is really important, so that we can further, get our reach out there and help teachers find their joy again, and help students start thinking for themselves. So yeah, Curiosity2 Creates, we're all over. And then the Creative Thinking Network, we're working together to really try and kind of shake education up just a little bit.
Well, I love that. And I can think of no greater cause support than giving teachers joy and having that joy trickle down to all of our children, and to have them open up their minds to start thinking, creating. That's what makes our country so fantastic, is that our innovative spirit. I mean, that's what makes us Americans. And I love the whole idea of just igniting all these beautiful young minds and inspiring them. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for sharing your story. We've loved learning about this. And I hope everybody is listening, is going to Curiosity2, number 2, create, to support your great work, Katie. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure.
A treat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Charity Matters podcast. I so enjoyed talking to our guest, Katie, about what it takes to start a business that truly changes people's lives. I think her comment about the importance of cooperation was so inspiring and true. To learn more about modern day heroes and entrepreneurs, or if you'd like to reach out to us, visit us at charity-matters.com or connect with us on Instagram at Charity Matters. If you enjoyed our conversation, we would love it if you shared it with your family and friends. And please don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. But more than that, thank you for caring, for believing in goodness, and for being part of our movement. You are exactly what the world needs more of. And remember that together we can make a difference, one small act of kindness at a time. Charity matters.